You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Jill Bober, an educator and parent coach who came on to tell her personal ADHD story, but also shared how it informs her work. We discussed her recent diagnosis at age 34, how her experience helping her students led her to pursue an evaluation, the realizations and help the diagnosis gave her, how her social nature and good behavior in school made it difficult for teachers to know she was struggling, and how her parents' insight was therefore so important, anxiety around test taking, how a different learning setting felt helpful to her, using tools to help her absorb information through multiple media at once, such as video with closed captioning, learning to advocate for herself, how important that was for her, and how teens can learn to do the same, the fact that she had other learning challenges as well, and the value of understanding her learning style, the value of clarity in instructions, how and why she hates doing laundry, dealing with strong emotions and how she helps her students with this, negative self-talk, time management, and a lot more. A couple of interesting points. In this conversation, she used notes. At first, it threw me off. It sounded kind of scripted, but then she called it out and how it is a tool that helps her, and she doesn't want to pretend she doesn't need it. I like that, and I hope you do too. Also, in a first on the podcast, part of how she introduced herself was that she is an avid Knicks fan. She even texted me a couple of days ago to let me know that we recorded this interview right before they began their current playoff winning streak, which is presently at 11 games. In my practice as a coach, I frequently use sports analogies for clients who are into sports, and I happen to be fond of sports analogies, but this was the first time it came up here, and we referenced it a few times. This is an example of how a passion or a hobby can serve as an outlet as well as a teaching opportunity. Quick shout out to the Chinuch Today podcast, hosted by former ADHD Heroes podcast guest, Rabbi Yerachmiel Garfield, and now onto the episode. Enjoy! Jill Bober, welcome to the ADHD Heroes podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yes, me too.
Okay, great. Let's dive right in. So what can you tell our listeners to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you again for having me. It's great to be here. Many people know me as a teacher who is always in blue and orange. You should probably know I am a diehard Knicks fan, and that New York grit definitely carries over to my work. I am a Bank Street trained special educator. I came to New York for the degree and stayed for the work. I spent the last decade or so doing the real work on the ground, so navigating everything from classrooms and homes to parks and libraries, so wherever a child and their family needs me most. Today, I balance being a kindergarten teacher by day with running my parent coaching company, Coachable Change, in the evenings. With my background in special ed, I've realized my heart is really in the work of advocacy. So I spent the last 8 years or so leaning into that work, and I'm looking to shift more of my focus in that direction because I love helping families find their voice. I help with everything from tough behaviors at home to the overwhelming feeling when getting a new diagnosis or IEP, which is Individualized Education Plan. A lot of times I feel like clinical reports like neuropsychs are written by professionals for other professionals, which can make them feel like a foreign language. So I help navigate the tricky terminology and explain the technical findings. My goal is to help parents transform a 20-something page report into a practical roadmap that they can actually use. That way, when they walk into an IEP meeting, they don't feel lost. Instead, they feel like the expert and the captain of the team, ready to advocate for exactly what their child needs. My focus has grown beyond just a child to include the whole support system because success happens when we adjust to the world around them, not by trying to change who they are. I think of it like basketball, the game I've loved my whole life. Success isn't about one person scoring all the points. It's about the desire to see the whole team succeed and work together to stay in the game. And I understand this not just professionally, but personally. Earlier this year, I went through my own evaluation process and was diagnosed with ADHD. To me, the ADHD experience is a lot like being a Nick fan. It takes resilience, patience, and the ability to stay hopeful about soon winning a championship, even on the tough things.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. How do you have time to watch Nick games with all that work?
I was at the game on Monday. I'm very lucky. I balance things as well as I can. I prioritize everything as much as I can.
Excellent. Okay. So what precipitated your diagnosis?
Sure. What led me to getting diagnosed later in life was really recognizing my own challenges with regulation. I was supporting students with these needs all day long. And at some point, I thought, I'm seeing some of this in myself too. I was overwhelmed a lot. I was struggling to start and finish tasks and definitely avoided things I did not want to do. I overcommitted constantly. I always joke around with people that I'm a bit of a FOMO girl, which is a work in progress. Over time, I started noticing patterns. I'd been coping for years and using pure willpower to keep an organized exterior while feeling completely exhausted underneath. Part of my confusion was that I had been labeled with a learning disability. So for years, we were looking for tools to support learning when I actually needed support with executive functioning and focus. That awareness pushed me to get evaluated recently. When I told my family, they didn't seem surprised at all. In fact, my sister said, "Well, that tracks." Specifically, my mom said that more than anything, she felt relief from me that I finally had an answer. For me, it shifted the narrative from a list of character flaws to the reality of my brain chemistry. Now that the same relief that my mom feels for me is what I try to provide for my clients, helping them trade self criticism for the right tools. When I actually looked back at my high school records, there was a line when I told an evaluator I was not ADD, just easily distracted. It's funny to look at now, but it shows how much I was trying to make sense of a brain that felt different without having the right words for it yet. I was identifying the symptom, but I didn't have the key to the root cause yet. This past weekend, I read through my reports from extracurriculars, elementary, middle, and high school. I saw the evidence everywhere. For the first time, I finally noticed these consistent patterns where my teacher said things like, "She has great insight, but I wish she would just focus more in class." With this new information, I now realize they were describing my ADHD in real time, even if none of us knew that's what it was back then. A diagnosis can be the moment things finally start making sense. For years, I wondered why simple things were so hard for me. Getting an answer allowed me to stop being my own worst critic and finally start being my own coach.
That's amazing. Can you give some examples of how your brain, works differently?
For sure. Back in fourth grade, I underwent neuropsych testing for the first time. Now that I have my adult diagnosis and background in special ed, I understand things completely differently. A detail I really appreciated in my neuropsych was she has all the necessary parts or ingredients, including details and transition words, but her challenge is not getting to the point. She has trouble summarizing and deciding what details can be left out and bunched together. This is so me. My brain still works the same way, but the difference is that now I understand the why. I am actually using some scripted notes to help me stay grounded for our conversation today. Having these notes is actually a tool that helps me perform my best. I think it's so important that we normalize sharing our strategies. When we stop hiding our tools, we make it easier for our children to advocate for what they need. My old reports actually made it seem like I was two different students at once. I was acing French grammar, and in math, my teacher mentioned that I would hit the wrong button on the calculator and not even realize that my answer was not logical. Talk about a total disconnect. My verbal brain was running a marathon while my spatial and nonverbal brain was still trying to find its sneakers. That's why I tell parents a bad grade or a struggle in one subject doesn't mean a lack of intelligence. It often means a mismatch in how information is being processed. Once we find the right entry point for that child's brain, whether it's visuals, language, or movement, the music finally starts to play. My mom used to say that I would enter Jillian land and I would eventually need to come back down. Today, I realize Jillian land wasn't a place of defiance. It is just where my brain went when the marathon got too exhausting, and I needed a water break.
Oh wow. We love hearing strategies, so thank you for sharing that. Out of
Many
curiosity.
more to come.
Okay, great. I'm looking
Many
forward.
more to come, yes.
Awesome. Um, the reports you're looking at from school. What decades are we talking about?
Yeah.
'Cause I think I've noticed people know more and more as time goes on. We are still trying to create more awareness. That's what we're doing right here, hopefully. But
Yes,
what
of
decades are we
course.
talking about?
So 90s to So I was born in 1991. So in fourth grade, I was in the late 90s. And really, just this past weekend, my mom gave me a humongous folder with reports from Hebrew school, from middle school, from early elementary and high school. And I think that my current background in being able to read an IEP has given me a different lens and more of an opportunity to dig deeper in understanding my own brain. So I was really hyper focused this past weekend on reading through this. And I mentioned a lot of things coming up in our future questions today that really give me insight. And a lot of those strategies are strategies I share with clients and students today. So that piece is really exciting for me to see.
Okay, great. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more. Um,
Sure.
you mentioned in the pregame that your mother had some valuable insights about your learning needs. What are they, and when did they come up?
Sure. So I interviewed my own mother for this for quite a while, which was really fun for me to hear her perspective, although I knew it growing up. As a grown up now, hearing her discuss it with me is a different story and funnier in a sense, with her painting a clear picture of me. So, from my mom's perspective, she said it was always hard for her to figure out what was really going on with me. She told me it wasn't clear if I had a learning issue or if I was just a quirky learner. Let me tell a story that paints a clear picture of me. In second grade, I was given an assignment to write about something I was good at, including details and reasons. I chose, I am good at snorting like a pig. This is
Still
exactly
are.
what I wrote. Oh, yes. When I brought it home, my mom did not know what to do with it. She was baffled. She saw me doing so many other beautiful things and she couldn't understand why I would have picked that. The teacher told her she did the assignment perfectly and this is just who she is, an out of the box thinker. My mom knew that I was so individual, very social, and easygoing. She said that I wasn't very focused on being a model student, but rather being a model person. I wasn't very studious, but very personable. My mom revealed to me that there were times in my early elementary where they thought I was too young for my grade and should be held back. That same second grade teacher told her my learning style was different, but not to confuse that with being a problem. It wasn't until I reached upper elementary and middle school, where the academic expectations increased, that it became clear that I was struggling and needed more support. My parents requested testing to better understand how to help me and to make decisions about middle school. Looking back, I realized that being personable and social was my version of masking. When you wear a mask, you're covering up your face. But when you're masking, it's behaving in a way to show on the outside that you fit in, covering up internal struggles. I was using my social skills to navigate the school day, but beneath the surface, I was working twice as hard just to stay afloat. It's a reminder that a happy or easygoing child can still be a child who is struggling. This part of my story is why I'm so passionate about advocacy today. My parents had to be the ones to advocate on my behalf because the school did not see it since I was not a child causing trouble. It shows why a parent's gut instinct is often the most important piece of the puzzle.
That's incredible. What did that masking look like?
For me, I just remember being a social child who would avoid tasks that I didn't feel interested in. Test taking gave me a lot of anxiety. And I have many memories of going to the nurse in preparation for a test so that I could avoid it or get more time to study just because I went into literal freeze when I felt overwhelmed by so much information on the page or when it was my turn to perform and the way that the information was presented to me wouldn't allow me to show my best. So, test taking my whole life caused me so much anxiety. Um, Even when I studied for New York State testing to become a teacher, the strategies I used, I don't know if you're familiar with BrainPop. It's
I
a
don't
way
think
to
so.
teach. It's a website where you teach students through a small robot named Moby, and he teaches and breaks down learning using visual and audio and closed captionings on the bottom. And I'll share as we get through this conversation how, in order for me to memorize information and process everything I watch, still to this day, I watch video with audio so that I'm able to process it simultaneously. And that's a tool that helps me.
Right. You mentioned one second grade teacher who was really on the ball, and shout out there, and that your parents advocated well for you. Were there other adults in your life who were helpful?
Yes. So when I was younger, I have a very close family, which I am so grateful for. They really taught me how to go out of my way. They really went out of their way for me and they really taught me to advocate for myself. But by middle school, it was clear that I needed a different learning setting and a specific set of academic support. So my parents put me in a school with smaller classroom that and had me retested. That was a turning point for me because when we changed the setting to fit the child rather than forcing the child to fit the setting, that is where the real progress happens. So if there's a voice in your head as a parent telling you the current environment isn't working, I feel it is worth following through on that instinct. My teachers at the time supported me by using a lot of modeling and breaking complex ideas down into manageable parts. Because my brain struggled with abstract concepts, and still does, I relied heavily on multisensory learning. So being able to see, hear, and move while learning helped the information finally stick. I used audiobooks for nonfiction so I could access the material without getting overwhelmed with the text, and I relied heavily on graphic organizers to keep my thoughts from floating away. Math was always the hardest for me and still is. I needed everything broken down into tiny concrete steps. So my teachers would use manipulatives, so physical objects that you can move around, to help me understand things like word problems that otherwise felt completely overwhelming. It's fascinating for me to look back at these 20-year-old documents and see the recommendations I was giving then are some of the same tools I teach families to use day to day. A strategy that helped me, which I now show to my families, is using an accordion folder to organize the week. So, labeling each section so the child can see exactly what needs to be done and on which day. We also pair audiobooks with physical text so they can hear and see the story at the same time. These are tools that allow the child to show what they're truly capable of.
Wow. And those middle school years, it sounds like there's a lot of detail and thought that went into that. Who was on top of all that? It's a lot of
My
work.
parents,
Your parents, whoa, they
well,
followed you
my
step.
mom is a teacher and my dad is a doctor,
Right.
and both brilliant people who I am forever indebted to for making sure that I was in the right place and getting the support I needed.
That's really incredible. Those all those different pieces, each one is golden. You mentioned the breaking the things down into smaller, to chunking it down into smaller pieces. That's a
Yes.
big deal. The knowing what should be audio, what should be visual, the different senses, tactile, being on top of each of those. That's a lot. Very impressive.
That was for me the only way I could learn. And when I was in an environment that was so overwhelming for me, doing those things was the only way to set me up for success.
That's amazing. Amazing that it worked out. What else did your diagnosis explain about your past?
Sure. So, looking back, my diagnosis explained so much. Reading back my fourth grade neuropsych, the clinician wrote that when I tried to make sense of a picture, I could see the parts, but not the whole. For a student, that's so exhausting. It's like being a detective who finds all the clues, but's never given the case file to see what the mystery they're actually solving. I know this feeling well because I am the person on the couch with the crunchy snack glued to Law and Order, trying to solve the case before the detectives. When I saw the same comment repeated in every single report for my entire schooling, it was a revelation for me. It confirmed that I didn't need to be smarter, I just needed a map to help my brain connect the dots. Personally, I'm a huge Marvel fan, and I think of it like the show Loki. My favorite character is Miss Minutes. I don't know if you're familiar, but
I know
in the
the old
show, you
Marvel
see all
comics.
these yeah. So in the show, you see all of these different timelines, sprouts branching off into a million directions. For me, that is exactly what an ADHD brain feels like. It's a constant branching of thoughts and ideas. This minutes to me represents the intense pressure of time and order, but without a map to manage those branches, you feel like you're time slipping through your own life. I had what I call a missed minutes scenario recently. We will call this friend Leo. He was brilliant. He could tell you every detail about the Marvel Universe or multiverse, but when it came back time to writing a simple three-sentence paragraph, he would just sit there staring at the blank page, eventually ending up in his own version of Jillian Land. To his teacher, it looked like he was being defiant, but I know Leo just had too many branches and no map. So to help him, I use what I call a stoplight roadmap. So I grabbed three colored post it notes: green for the start, yellow for the middle, and red for the stop. I had him draw one tiny doodle on each note to externalize his ideas. Once those parts were on the desk, the whole appeared for him. He wasn't staring at the void anymore, he was just starting to connect the dots. This is exactly why I've dedicated my career to building those maps. I want to provide that whole picture so that this next generation of learners can spend less time slipping and more time seeing what they're truly capable of. Today, when I see a student's eyes light up because something as simple as a graphic organizer helps them make sense of the overwhelm, I feel it deeply. I'm not just seeing a student succeed, I'm seeing a younger version of myself finally coming back from Jillian Land with the tools to stay in the game.
That's cool. That's powerful. There are these moments, I think we all have, where the creativity is kind of swirling around, but like you said, nothing's landing on paper. So you had that strategy that helps him harness that. How does that work? How do you is that your own, and how does that work?
Um, well, I have had so many mentors, I'll say, from which I've learned many strategies. And I think as a lifelong learner and teacher and observer of all things, I think it's so important. I'm not a one trick pony. I tried so many things with so many students. And once you spend so much time with a child, you really get to see what their strengths are. So maybe they're lacking verbal or expressive language. And I know my students very well. So I just play to their strengths and figure out ways for them to express themselves or complete an assignment. And that's exactly the point of differentiated instruction.
Right. So it sounds like you get to know them well enough that you know what tweaks they need, and based on your experience, your personal experience, and your professional experience, you kind of know what to fit and where. I'm getting that right.
I like to think so, humbly.
Awesome. Sounds great. What are some other skills you learned for yourself when you were younger?
Sure. So, growing up, the most helpful things that worked for me were consistent routines, reminders to stay organized, and learning how to advocate for myself. My parents, as I mentioned, did a great job of demonstrating how to speak up for what I needed. They made sure, as much as possible, that I had a predictable homework and bedtime routine, which provided the structure I needed to actually begin and complete tasks. I relied heavily on checklists because I had such a challenging time organizing my thoughts and finishing tasks I did not like. I was and still can be a major procrastinator, and people often mistook that for a lack of effort. In reality, I was just struggling with executive functioning. It wasn't a choice to stay stuck, my brain just struggled to get going. My family to this day still reminds me to get on the path and leave Jillian Land, that place where I'm in my own world, totally disconnected from that task at hand. What others perceived as my weaknesses were actually underdeveloped skills that required extra support to build. Using these tools helped me to build a system so I could finally leave Jillian Land when I needed to and show what I was truly capable of. As a child, I was also very strong in language learning because I was taught French from an early age. I think this came from my ability to hyper focus on things I'm actually interested in. I discovered I could retain information much better by closing my eyes and picturing a screen or words on the page. Even today, as I mentioned, I rely on the same visual anchors. I almost always watch videos and TV with closed captioning because having that text there helps my brain process and recall information much more effectively. It's a simple tool, but it's the difference for me between information floating away and it actually sticking.
That's amazing. How did that self advocacy work for you? Because it seems like kids have a hard time. Like it's easy to explain to someone that they need to do it, but especially kids, they're
Yeah, of
like
course.
to swallow hard and do it. It's not easy. So what did that look like for you?
I think it's tricky to have young children be in that role. My parents just always modeled it for me. I also happened to be in the room for a lot of conversations, which I think was helpful for me because I listened to what they were saying. I also was, as I mentioned, a very social child, and it's just something I think came naturally to me in the sense that I love talking. So anyone who would talk to me, I would want to talk to. And my teachers often would mention to my parents the conversations we were having. And they always would tell them that I made sure I needed this, this, and this. And everyone worked together collaboratively to make sure that that's what happened.
Right, amazing. You mentioned reminders also. Who was on top of the reminders? Because that can also be a tricky thing.
My parents did everything and honestly, still continue to support me in this way, as do I write notes like on my door, on the mirror, all over to make sure. I also use a calendar, obviously, a million alerts on my phone every 5 minutes. Pop up, pop up. You need to do this. You need to do this. And that's just how it goes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are good. We are fans. What is something a parent or teacher of a child with ADHD can learn from your schooling experience?
Sure. So now that I understand learning differences and neurodivergence, so much of my past struggle have started to make sense to me. As a teacher, I know my role isn't to fix the child because I've never seen a child as broken. More often, it's a mismatch between a child's unique brain and the environment that they're in. The most important lesson is asking why a child can't do something yet rather than assuming they won't do it. This won't versus can't mindset shifts the focus away from blame and towards understanding. For a long time, people thought I was being difficult or lazy, but I wasn't choosing to struggle. I spent most of my life struggling through the flight or freeze response without having a name for it. So when a task felt abstract, my nervous system would take over. I would either flee into Jillian land or completely freeze in place. It's only now in my adult life that I'm learning the support strategies to manage that stress response. It all comes back to the word yet. That word holds the promise that even if the skill isn't there right now, it can be built. I think a bit like learning to ride a bike. Before you find your balance, you're wobbly and can be frustrated. But those falls aren't failures, they're data points. In practice, when a child is in that wobble and their nervous system is overwhelmed, I use a calm down corner reset. We might grab a stuffed animal or a desired toy, not as a distraction, but as a co regulation partner to help the child feel safe. We acknowledge it. You aren't ready to tackle this yet. So let's help your body get back to center. Once they're out of the stress response, we revisit the task using differentiated instruction. This might mean meeting them where they are by changing the visual demand. I might cover up half the worksheet, so there are fewer numbers on the page, or reduce the amount of text so they have to process it at once. By lightening the load, we make the re entry feel possible. By engaging the child using multisensory learning, so seeing, hearing, or moving, we give the brain more anchors. Over time, the wobble steadies, things start to click, and confidence builds. That experience shaped who I am as an educator. Now I make it a priority to see the whole child. Every brain has its own timeline, and when we stop trying to make children fit a mold and instead adjust the environment to support their nervous system, we give them the space they need to succeed exactly as they are.
That's amazing. So I'm hearing, if I can summarize this, I'm hearing you say that there's belief, like you believe the kid can do it. There's patience that it may take time. And then there's knowledge, the skills that you've learned to address where the kid is struggling. So in other words, it's not just like, I believe in you, let's go, but you know what you can actually do about it to help them get where they're trying to go.
Yeah, so in my class, there's a song, Power of Yet. It's Sesame Street.
Okay.
And I started the entire school year by reinforcing this concept. It's a growth mindset. So you might not be able to read yet, but by the end of this year, you will,
Not yet
because you will
proficient.
practice and practice and practice. So any skill, I'm a grown up with plenty of skills that I haven't reached yet, with potential to reach them in the future while I continue to grow. And I think by demonstrating this growth mindset, especially as a teacher with young children, and these children are like sponges. Everything I say, they're copying, they're going home telling the story. I know. And you have to be so confident and animated and all of this. And this helps encourage children to be the best version of themselves.
All right. That's amazing. That's the
As I'm
terminology.
sure you can tell, I'm quite an actress, and that is how I get through my day as a kindergarten teacher.
Awesome. That's the skill set. You mentioned a lot of college and advanced learning. How did that go?
Sure. For me, college marked a major shift because I finally had access to official support, but I actually needed to be honest with myself about what I truly needed in order to do well. So I went to Learning Center for extra time on tests, which was always a game changer for me. This was an accommodation I had all through high school, also. And that extra time didn't just give me the space to think, it lowered my anxiety, which had always been a huge barrier for me, especially around testing, which I mentioned. By the time I reached graduate school at Bank Street, I finally found an environment that aligned with my learning style. The classes were small. I had teachers who were genuinely interested in my personal experience in the class and explained concepts in ways that actually clicked for me. It was very much a high stakes time. I was navigating a new city. I moved here from Connecticut. I was working full time and attending school full time. So, yikes, I suddenly needed to be independent. I wasn't just relying on teachers to sample instruction for me anymore. For the first time, I was on my own to do all of these things. I realized that getting through grad school and actually enjoying it wasn't just about working hard. It was about being strategic and knowing exactly what I needed to perform at my best, even when balancing a massive workload.
How'd you do it?
Willpower, exactly as I explained, I've been running on this go, go, go for as long as I can remember, but it's been really such a mask. And when I figured out what it really was, I was like, "Oh my god, this makes sense now." So, I'm just now at this point in my adult life at 34, learning skills to support me in calming down, regulating, and without me being able to regulate as an adult, especially in high-paced environments, oftentimes, it's impossible for me to model regulation for children if I myself cannot do that.
Right. You mentioned that you had teachers um, at Bank Street who helped you, who explained things in ways that resonated for you. Were they trained? Was this natural? I had that. What did that look like?
I loved Bank Street. the experience, I would go back and learn more just because of my experience there being so amazing. I had smaller classes. The teachers would visit me while I was doing student teaching, give me feedback that actually helped me grow. They just really care about you and your experience. They sit down with you while you're writing papers, when you're learning how to get tests or learning how to teach children how to read. They model things for you that I wouldn't have necessarily known, obviously, even if I had seen it in classrooms. And any question never felt embarrassing for me, even I mean, I understand people feel embarrassed asking questions. Maybe I should have learned a lesson in that at a young age, but as I grow up, perhaps more. But anything that I asked was answered in a way that made sense for me and I would be able to put into practice. So I chose it because it was experiential learning. And I just love Bank Street. I would encourage anyone with a similar learning style to attend a school like that if you want to learn from people who love what they do, love their craft, and are great at it.
Amazing. It sounds like um, a lot of their genuine care and curiosity helped a lot. Does that make sense? Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, so
I
that's
felt supported from going in the door there. So that to me was a weight lifted off of my chest and making the decision of where I wanted to go to school. I mean, that's a big decision where to get your master's. So
right. It sounds like for teachers who are listening, it sounds like um, genuine curiosity and a lot of patience um, can teach you a lot with or without training. Think that's true?
I think so.
All right, amazing. Okay, so what is if we turn to our younger listeners, a teen or a young adult who is listening, what can they learn from your experience?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I recently sat down with my mom to talk about those years, and she shared something that really stuck with me. She said, one of the most eye opening things for me as your parent was watching how early you learn to speak up for yourself. That is the skill a lot of kids in middle and high school really struggle with. There is such huge social pressure to just stay quiet. Asking for a teacher to explain something again can feel like you're shining a spotlight on yourself, and that's intimidating. But you She said, but you reached a point where you realized asking for help was actually a competitive advantage. You didn't let the fear of what others thought stop you from getting what you needed. There were times when you might not have been fully tuned in the first time around because you knew you could have it retaught later in a way that worked for you. It was a constant process for us as parents to figure out, was it a choice that you were making, or was the classroom so loud and overwhelming that one on one time was the only way you could actually take the information in? So, looking back at my records, I found the source of that concern. In eighth grade, a teacher wrote that they were worried I was becoming a passive learner because I constantly sought out one to one help. Today, as an advocate, I want to go back and tell the teacher she isn't being passive, she's being incredibly active in her own survival. So, what looked like me being passive was actually me trying to scaffold my own learning because the standard environment wasn't working for me. I want teens to know that asking for a redo or re explanation isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign that you know exactly what you need to succeed. My takeaway from the conversation with my mom is that self advocacy is a superpower, but it only works if you're being completely honest with yourself. Learning how to ask for help is only half the battle. The other half is being brave enough to look at why you're stuck. If you find yourself drifting off or wanting to avoid a project, you have to stop and ask yourself, am I just not putting in the effort right now? Or is the way this is being taught making it impossible for my brain to grab onto it? There's a big difference between needing a different tool and your brain avoiding the work because it feels so overwhelming. When you can tell the difference, you stop feeling like you're failing and you start realizing you just need a different approach. Once you understand how your own brain handles information, you can stop trying to fit into everyone else's mold and start taking real ownership of how you learn.
When you distinguish between needing something different and feeling overwhelmed. Does overwhelmed just mean it's too much versus something different meaning it just has to be pitched differently? Or did I miss something there?
I think overwhelm looks different for everyone. I think anxiety is so wide for how everyone interprets their own anxiety, how everyone feels anxiety in their body, especially children who don't have the verbal language necessarily or don't know how to express it yet. The whole thing can be overwhelming. You can get a paper, say, for example, you get a word search and there's 10 words, and being able to find even a 3-letter word within a mishmash of letters just can be completely overwhelming. So, for example, I do something like that in my class, and I might show it on the board where I circle it the first time. I ask a friend to come up and circle it. I will ask a friend just to look for one word within all of those words. I might give a second paper where there's a smaller bank of letters. You just really need to play to the strengths of the children. And I think as parents, parents know their children very well and teachers know their children really well. And I think when children see teachers and parents working together, and bridging the gap between home and school, that can be really powerful and effective. And I think it's so important in terms of communication that children see parents and their teachers talking, because it's a team effort. It's not something that is easy for everyone. Nothing comes easy for everyone. So
When kids who are middle school or high school age want to advocate for themselves, but they're a little scared because they don't know how it's going to go over with the teacher, what can we tell them?
I understand the hesit hesitant being hesitant about going to advocate for yourself. But if you don't ask, you don't know. And without trying, you could continue suffering in silence, or you can quietly approach. That might look like you leaving a note to have a meeting later. That might look like you scheduling something quietly without it being public knowledge. But sitting and not understanding is not helpful for anyone. And a teacher will go out of their way to make sure that every child is able to learn in a way that meets their needs,
Right?
or
You're
they
saying,
should.
well, you're saying if it's a good teacher, you can hopefully trust that they'll be willing to hear you out.
I hope that, yes.
Okay, I hope so too. And as a sports fan, you know what percentage of shots that you don't take, you make.
Yes,
Exactly.
I do know about that.
You mentioned a bunch, but what else from your own experience do you bring to your teaching now?
Sure. So it was really only earlier this school year that I made the decision to do a deep dive into my own brain and complete the testing. So I was a child who had big feelings, learning differences, and organizational challenges. I had a pretty strong sense that I would be diagnosed with ADHD, and I was right. So I've learned that you don't need years of post diagnosis experience to start making sense of your life. In this short time, as I've started publicly sharing my diagnosis, so many people have said to me, "Wow, but you seem so organized and you do so much all the time." It's a vital realization that while people think ADHD looks like disorganized chaos, it can also look like overachieving exhaustion. I spent so long relying on pure willpower to keep up an organized exterior, but this awareness has finally allowed me to understand my nervous system and see my lifelong patterns with more compassion. In fact, looking at my old reports from middle school and high school feel like looking at a roadmap for the work that I do now. My files are filled with recommendations that I use every day. Every single recommendation mentioned that I succeed when the material was broken down into smaller parts to help me see the big picture. And all of my reports recommended books on tape so I could see and hear the information at the same time. So the exact kind of multisensory support that I advocate for. Looking at the files, I see the toll it takes when a child doesn't have the right tools. I was floundering and making negative comments about my own abilities because the concepts felt out of reach for me. It proves what I tell my clients: uncertainty creates anxiety, but clarity creates confidence. I think of it like this: if I hand you a box of 500 loose furniture parts and tell you to build a desk, you're going to feel overwhelmed before you even touch a screw. Most of us would look at that box and think, ugh, isn't this what TaskRabbit is for? Because the mental cost of starting is just too high. This uncertainty makes you want to walk away entirely. But students don't have a TaskRabbit for their homework. They only have a rubric or directions. If I give you a manual that shows you exactly how piece A connects to piece B, the task changes instantly. Clarity is the instruction manual for a child's brain. When we break a project into small parts, we aren't making the work easier. The desk is still 500 pieces, but we're giving the child the confidence to pick up the first piece and start building. In my adult life, I am working on softening the harsh self criticism and responding to those around me with more clarity. I'd love to share a story that brings this all together. I currently do one to one with a student who's incredibly bright, but task initiation is a major hurdle for her. I've learned that by providing scaffolding for her, so breaking tasks into tiny steps and allowing for sensory input like music or even a crunchy snack, I meet her exactly where she is. I also lean heavily on body doubling with her. If you aren't familiar with the term, it's essentially having a productivity partner, someone who is just there while you work. Their presence acts like an anchor that keeps your brain from drifting off task. Through my own journey, I realized how critical body doubling is for my own life, especially with those undesirable tasks. For me, that task is laundry. I wondered for so long why something as simple as putting clothes away felt so impossible. Growing up, I avoided puzzles or games like Tetris, and as an adult, that same spatial awareness struggle shows up in my dresser drawers. Trying to make everything fit can lead to a complete meltdown. In those moments, I've learned to call a friend or break the task down by section. Having a body double, even over the phone, provides the momentum I need to get through it. That is all I'm trying to be for my students: a steady, calm presence while they figure out their own puzzles. I use the same approach on the social emotional side when we're dealing with big feelings. We do a multi step activity called the feelings monster. I have the student name their monster, which gives that big emotion a personality. And we add a note that says, I eat up the things I cannot control. To make it real for them, I share examples from my own life. I tell them, oh, my monster is eating my frustration that the Knicks lost last night, or he's eating the stress I feel about my messy drawers. Then I help them identify their own challenges. Maybe that's a loud hallway or a math problem that feels impossible, and we feed those to the monster. We even decide on a specific place for the monster to live so they know exactly where to put those big feelings when they start to bubble up. I don't think having HD makes me a broken educator. It just gives me a different kind of empathy. I see the hurdles my students are facing because I'm still jumping them every day myself. I don't have a magic wand, but by normalizing our strategies and showing kindness to ourselves, we find the joyful momentum we need to stay in the game.
That's great. Sounds like you allow your own successes to propel you into the classroom. That's awesome.
I'm definitely trying.
That's great. What are some other strategies you use for yourself now as an adult?
Sure. So, even though I've developed a lot of compensation skills over the years, I still navigate ADHD every day. My biggest challenges, again, tend to be staying organized, managing overstimulation, and battling the inner critic. I also struggle with lateness and a lot of anxiety around timing and deadlines, especially when last minute changes pop up, which completely throws me off. To manage these, I mostly rely on four strategies. The first is offloading my executive functioning. I use a strategy called externalizing time because my brain does not naturally feel time passing, which is often called time blindness. To fix this, as I mentioned, I set up many alerts, so three main alerts on my watch to handle that worrying for me, because if I have a meeting or I need to go somewhere, I need that warning. So I set usually a 1 hour warning, a 15-minute warning, and a 5-minute warning. By trusting my calendar to be the boss, I can fully focus on my work without constantly checking my clock. The second strategy is managing overstimulation. When I feel my nervous system hitting a wall, maybe the classroom has been extra loud or I've been staring at a screen for way too long, I feel the need to reset. Sometimes that looks like stepping into the hallway for a minute of silence. I say out loud, I need a minute to the people around me. I know I need that moment to regulate myself, get back to center. Otherwise, honestly, I'm a mess. Other times, it might be just grabbing a quick, crunchy snack that does the trick. The third strategy is the one thing rule. When my to-do list feels like an impossible mountain and I start to freeze up, I focus on just one thing. Let me tell it to you in basketball terms. I have to stop looking at the whole season and just focus on the next play. So when I'm stuck, I tell myself, I'm not trying to win the championship by myself right now. I just need to focus on scoring one free throw, one small, concrete task like sending an email or organizing a drawer. I also remember to lean on my team, whether that's calling a friend or just taking a moment to reset. When I do this, my paralyzing self criticism quiets and I can focus on what's next. And finally, fourth, planning for transitions. Transitions are usually where I lose my momentum, and this is true going all the way back to when I was younger. If I had to leave the house at 8, I tell myself the leave time is actually 7:50. That 10-minute buffer is my safety net for when I inevitably lose my keys or forget a change of clothes. It turns a high anxiety sprint into a manageable walk. This makes a huge difference in helping me feel less scattered and more confident. Beyond these big four, I also lean on what I call micro strategies. These are tiny 5-second habits that keep me from stalling out during the day. Don't put it down, put it away. My brain loves to leave things for later, but I've learned that later is a trap. If it takes less than 60 seconds, like hanging up a coat or washing a dish, I need to do it immediately. Externalizing my memory. If I need to remember to bring something with me in the morning, I will literally put it on top of my shoes or right in front of the door. I don't trust my brain to remember it. Instead, I make it so that I would need to trick before I leave. And also, narrating my actions. When I'm feeling scattered, I'll actually talk to myself out loud. I say, I'm walking into the kitchen to get a snack, so I don't end up standing in the kitchen 5 minutes later wondering why I'm there. These tools, the big ones and the tiny ones, are how I save my mental energy for the things that actually matter. They keep me from getting lost in Jillian land so I can show up fully for my students and their families.
That is amazing stuff. Great stuff. As we start to wrap it up, what's a message of hope you can leave our listeners with?
Sure. So, a diagnosis of ADHD can feel overwhelming at first, but it's often the beginning of things making sense for the first time, not falling apart. So, many people spend years wondering why certain tasks feel so much harder than they should. A diagnosis can give clarity. ADHD is highly manageable with the right support. Many people with ADHD are creative, energetic, and curious, and they think in different ways. With the right support, these can become strengths. Not only that, but a diagnosis doesn't lower expectations for your future. It helps tailor the path so those expectations are actually reachable. With understanding, support from your village, and the right tools, people with ADHD don't just cope, they often thrive.
Okay, amazing. How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. You can reach me by email at coachablechange@gmail.com or find me through my website, www.coachablechange.com.
Okay, sounds great. Anything else you wanted to mention today?
Sure. So, my work with Coachable Change isn't about fixing kids, it's about coaching the whole team. I want every parent to leave our sessions feeling like the confident captain of their child's advocacy team with a clear game plan and the tools to move forward. People with ADHD often think in unconventional ways, and I want people to see those differences as strengths, not shortcomings. But let's be honest, neurodivergence is a journey. Of course, there will be tough losses, days when the routine falls apart and the tools don't work. But to me, a diagnosis isn't a white flag, it's like a rally towel. It's you saying, put me in, coach. I'm not here to sit on the bench, I'm part of the starting five. It's about finding your team, the people who support you on the hard days, and celebrate the wins with you. Being a diehard fan means you don't give up after one bad game. And in the same way, a diagnosis does not lower expectations, it changes the strategy. With the right strategy, the right support, and the right mindset, you don't just stay in the game, you start to change it. If you're ready to build your team's game plan, visit me at coachabilichange.com. Let's get to work.
Okay, sounds great. Jill Bober, thank you so much. This is such a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.